Voters casting their ballot in the 1858 Illinois Senate race didn't have to wonder where the two candidates stood on major issues. That's because Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas held a series of long, in-depth debates in 7 of Illinois' then 9 congressional districts. The typical Lincoln-Douglas debate lasted 3 hours, with each candidate delivering an hour-long address before rebuttals. Today's intellectual coliseum looks a little different. In an ever-polarized political ecosystem, genuine policy debate has fallen by the wayside. If you've tried debating someone in your life recently, you may find it difficult to agree on the basic facts of the topic at hand. Everybody grows more insular and is less willing to consider alternative viewpoints in this vicious and self-fulfilling cycle. Which is one reason my friend and our next guest, Mehdi Hasan, waded into the internet rage bait swamp to debate 20 far-right conservatives for the YouTube channel Jubilee. Big swaths of this country, including many young people, have drifted further to the right in the Trump era, and reaching out to at least some of them is going to be crucial in stopping our slide to autocracy. The debate was not particularly smooth. Some of the contestants were openly racist toward Mehdi. One told Mehdi, an American citizen, to get the hell out of the country. Others, he found out, were a far cry from the Reagan-style conservatives that people talk about. At least one was an open fascist. Many were anti-democracy. Most were indifferent to the Constitution. But Mehdi did get to do some actual debating.
You find a net negative impact when there's a 10% increase of immigration. You find around a 0.5% decline in wages when it comes to the specific occupations they're going to.
So
all your studies are flawed.
So 0.5%. Weigh that up against what I just mentioned from the Congressional Budget Office, which is a massive boost in GDP per head, which you're not counting for, massive increase in tax revenue, immigrants actually funding the deficits and debts by paying way more in taxes proportionately. There's a man named Daniel Rodriguez. He got 12 years in prison for taking a stun gun and tasing a police officer in the neck and giving him a heart attack. The judge said he was a one-man army of hate. Donald Trump pardoned him. Does that not make Trump pro-criminal? He's letting violent criminals out of prison.
I would say no, it doesn't make him pro-criminal.
You're okay with that?
I did not say that. I said that one pardon against somebody.
It was 1,600 pardons.
The precedent of the last 100 years, wherein the country has been completely different from its founding, should not overrule the original intent of the people who wrote the document that you and I are both citing. Okay. Which means...
But I'm not locked into what the people who wrote that. We've had amendments to the Constitution. You know that, right?
I understand that.
Okay.
And this is our fundamental disagreement, is that I don't believe...
You think you could read the minds of people in the 1770s?
That's not true.
And I'm stuck.
I just believe this country ought to be more like the country we originally had.
This country ought to be more like the country we originally had. Mehdi made some inroads, but this type of debate does have its limits. After one debater, Connor, identified as a fascist and said that former Spanish dictator Francisco Franco was a model leader, Mehdi refused to engage with him.
I'm going to get in power, and I'm going to frankly punish you when you try to leverage power against me. Just that simple.
I'm not sure what you want to say.
Hey, it is what it is.
Okay, yeah, and you're a real good journalist because you don't talk to people who identify as like a political ideology. I mean, that's a very liberal idea.
I don't debate fascists.
Mehdi Hasan, my great friend, joins me now. He is the editor-in-chief of and CEO of Zeteo News. He's the author of the book Win Every Argument: The Art of Debating, Persuading, and Public Speaking. Mehdi, between that and what just happened before that with Trump, this is quite a day to talk about debating, so I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me, Ali, and only you could start a segment with Lincoln and Douglas.
Let's talk about this discussion, and you've had it, and I know this, the discussion about how much to engage with people like this. You do have a line, and you drew it. Describe the balance between taking on beliefs, arguing them, debating them, and what some people will refer to as platforming, nonsense. How do you square this in your head?
It's a great question, and it goes to the heart of our current politics, because I have, for 20 years, had a no platforming of fascist policy as a journalist, both in the UK and in the US, both in my kind of private life when I'm appearing in events and my professional life when I'm hosting people on my show. The problem we have now, of course, Ali, as you know better than me, is in this country, fascism has gone mainstream. One of our two major parties used to be a conservative party with a fascist fringe. It's now basically a fascist party with a conservative fringe. So if you want to engage in political debate, you can't really avoid the fascists or the neo-fascists
fascists or the fascist adjacent folks, because they're all over Fox and they're all over the Republican Party. They're all in the White House and the administration. They're all pundits on air. So that becomes very tricky. Now, in this debate, I went in eyes wide open knowing that these folks were going to be extreme. I mean, who describes themselves as a far-right conservative? When Jubilee told me we're going to call it you versus 20 far-right conservatives, I said, you're going to really find people who call themselves far-right conservatives? Okay, fine. So I knew they would be extreme. I knew they were going to be defending Trump and defending all sorts of nonsense. What I didn't expect is kind of open racism of the kind we haven't seen for a long time, where people are telling me to my face to get out of the country. People are telling me that, you know, white people are Native Americans. People are telling me that I'm a fascist, as you just saw that guy Connor say. And I had to say, at this point, I'm not debating you. And it's a very simple point. It's not about being afraid or being politically correct. Fascism is a form of violence, right? Fascism is not democratic. Fascism has no interest in political or racial equality. And therefore, what is the point of debating with someone who doesn't believe in debate, doesn't believe in democracy? The telling moment in that debate is when Connor says, yeah, I'm just doing this to get my argument across. Like the problem we have right now, those of us who believe in debate, is how do we do it in a way where we don't allow these fascists to use debate as a way of both laundering their ideas, mainstreaming themselves into respectability, but also using it to undermine democracy itself, like one election, one time, as he himself admitted.
So let's stay with Connor for a second. I want to play a clip from Connor the fascist, self-described fascist, that gets to the point that we were discussing, that autocracy can arise through democratic means.
The reason we have free speech now is because we want to be openly talking about our opinions so we can get the state that we want. But it doesn't mean upholding free speech after we win. Again, I mentioned
the only good thing about this fascist moment we're in is that you guys are so open about it.
I mean, that was wild. I actually had to, I watched it and then I had to read it in print to understand that again. We talk about our opinions so we can get the state we want. Doesn't mean a fully free speech after we win again.
Yep. And he even talks about the fact that once they get their leader, that's it. The leader's in. The benevolent dictator, in his mind, is in, taking out enemies. And look, this stuff is not as fringe as we once thought. A lot of people have criticized me for doing this debate, and it's a legitimate criticism. I get it. I might criticize me in a different scenario. But let me just be devil's advocate. And yeah, literally devil's advocate, is in this case, the redeeming feature of this stuff is you see it out in the open. A lot of people in our country, Ali, you know this. You and I had many conversations before the last year's election. There are people who are in the center ground. There are people on the left, liberal left, who are still in denial about what is happening in our country, who are still thinking it can't happen here, who still think, oh, this is alarmism or hyperbole from you journalists, folks, who still think, well, the institutions will protect us. And this is the real problem. We have a growing, I'm not saying those people are the majority of Republicans or the majority of Trump supporters. I am saying they are a vocal and young minority who are growing in numbers, especially online. And we need to be very aware. These people, you know, some of them said some dumb, ignorant stuff, yes, but some of them know what they're doing. Some of them are very savvy in their far-right approach to politics. They're well coordinated. What I discovered after doing the show is that a lot of them are influencers online. They're already interconnected. And a lot of our young kids are going online and going down this rabbit hole. Young people, people of color. It is a truly radicalizing moment.
You were talking to Tim Miller on the Bulwark podcast, and you told him you came to debate 4 topics: crime, the Constitution, immigration, and Gaza. You tried many times to talk about 4 topics. They mainly wanted to talk about immigration and you in some cases.
I think the case is now closed for anyone who's still ludicrous to believe that. Remember the debate from 2016, Ali? What drove the Trump MAGA base? Was it economic insecurity or was it racial resentment? I think if you spend an hour and a half watching that Jubilee debate on YouTube, I think it's pretty clear what drives the core of the MAGA base. It is racial resentment. It is cultural resentment. It is the browning of America. When they say make America great again, they're very explicit that it means make America white again. It means going back to not just the 1950s, but the 1770s. And this is very, very clear from these people. And the obsession with immigration. By the way, on Gaza, here's something interesting and scary. I'm someone who, as you know, is very critical of Israel's behavior and war crimes in Gaza. And I'm critical of Israel because I support equal human dignity and I support the rights of any people to be free, including the Palestinians. These folks actually didn't want to debate me on Gaza. They actually said, we agree with you on Gaza. But why? because they're anti-Semites, a lot of them. A lot of them don't like Israel because they're anti-Semitic. And we haven't talked very much in this country about the old school anti-Semitism being alive and well on the far right, including in the Trump base. We have a president who talks about Shylock bankers and has dinner with a Holocaust denier. This too is part of the new far right phenomenon, the old anti-Semitism. Meanwhile, we have groups like the ADL and others just obsessing over pro-Palestinian students on campus and a placard about Palestine. Meanwhile, these guys are back with some of the worst anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracies we've seen for years. So that's another disturbing part of this debate.
Yeah, you had an actual sort of guy who didn't think the Holocaust was that big a deal on the panel as well. One moment that didn't go all that viral was a brief conversation you had with somebody named Edwin, who spoke to you about his journey as an undocumented immigrant. Let's listen.
Actually, I was an illegal immigrant myself. I came here when I was 10. I'm what you would call a legal alien now. I didn't have any say on my parents' choices.
Yes.
Do I think that they were well-meaning by wanting to bring me over for a better future? Absolutely. I believe that. Immigration is it's an interesting issue because I do agree with you that
Good to hear.
everyone is an immigrant in the sense like. Can you tell me a little bit more about your journey?
I've been here 10 years. I'm a proud American citizen. I'm a dual national. I'm British. I'm American. And I am an immigrant who's contributing to this country. So, yes, I'm very much proud of America's immigrant heritage. I'm part of it. And despite what one of the other people said on this show earlier, everyone here, unless you're Native American, is a descendant of immigrants.
Sorry, you've been voted out.
Okay, so for people who are not familiar with Jubilee, sorry you've been voted out. When the others in the room think that you're not doing a good job, either you're losing the argument or you've lost the argument intellectually, they vote you out. So in the middle of what I think might have been the most nuanced part of that 90 minutes, the most interesting part of that 90 minutes, where the guy actually inquired about your journey, boom, out.
Boom, out, because what was he doing there? I mean, look, this was a group of about 20 people, of which I counted maybe 3 or 4 non-white people. And what was interesting is I always find, Ali, you like me, we find, those of us who are brown watching the right always find it fascinating when we see our fellow browns in that group. And we think, what are you doing there? They'll never love you. And there was this moment where poor old Edwin's sitting there. He's arrived as a far-right conservative. He's arrived, I presume, as a Trump supporter. And then he looks around the room and he realizes what group he's in. At one moment, he said to me, I think he said, I don't agree with these racists behind you. So he realized that some of the people in that group don't have his best interests at heart. There is this moment, as we know, since January 20th, where a lot of Latino voters for Trump have kind of woken up and said, I didn't know he would go after my abuela. I thought he was going to go after, the criminals and the violent. You've seen many examples of Latino American Trump supporters now suddenly waking up and going, oh, my God, I did not know this would happen to me and my family. Edwin was bold to talk about his own personal story. I was worried for him in that moment. We're sitting in a warehouse in LA. A, I'm worried about his security with these people he was going to have to go back into a green room with. B, I'm worried whether they're going to call ICE on him because he's a legal immigrant now, but he's sitting there saying, I was an illegal immigrant. Who knows what the parent status are? He's covered in tattoos, which, as we know, ICE now automatically says if you have a tattoo, you're a gang member. Right. And I was actually worried for this guy's safety and security that he had the boldness to come out and talk about his experience. Of course, we've seen Trump's support amongst Latinos crater since January 20th. They were bragging about how many Latino votes they had won last year, which was remarkable. I won't deny that. But it has cratered this year as they've seen the kind of fascist ICE Gestapo militias go round up Latino American citizens in places like LA.
I got less than a minute left, but I have to ask you, a week later, would you do this again?
No, I probably wouldn't do it again because, again, out of choice, I wouldn't sit down with fascists and white supremacists who tell me to get out. I'm a brown-skinned immigrant American. Nobody should have to go through that kind of stuff.
Yeah, interesting. You had to have a conversation with somebody about the fact that you are both an immigrant and an American citizen. They felt that those two things don't really work together. Thanks, my good friend. I appreciate that. This is one of those things, Mehdi. I'm glad you did it, so I don't have to. Mehdi Hasan, my good friend, is the editor-in-chief and CEO of Zeteo News. He's the author of a book that you should read. It's a really remarkable, very easily accessible book called "Win Every Argument: The Art of Debating, Persuading, and Public Speaking."